What is the difference between ambition and greed? This is an open question. You don't need to have any knowledge here. Think about it. What is it? Because if I say, what is ambition? Ambition is, in Arabic, they call it alu al-himma, for example. Alu al-himma or himma. Greed is tama. What is the difference? Yes?
An ambition may be something that's more outward towards the community, and greed is more maybe self-directed in terms of what you want to achieve.
But can you not have ambition that relates only just to yourself, but doesn't, not to sound like a full-on liberal here, but doesn't harm the community? So for example, if you were to say, I want to go to the gym, I have ambition to bench press 200 kilograms, would that be a greedy thing, or would that be ambition?
That would be ambition.
Okay, so it's not really a community thing. You're not benefiting necessarily. You could argue that.
So you could think of it as two circles. You've got ambition, you've got greed, and there's an overlap.
There's a huge overlap. So my question, because this is the reason why I bring ambition and greed, discussion of those two things, is because we'll soon talk about the difference between contentment and complacency. Contentment and complacency are similar, just like greed and ambition are similar. But the reason why I'm bringing them to you is because I want to see what the difference is. There's a very famous scene in one of the films that I saw on YouTube where there's a guy.
Greed is good.
He's saying greed is good. DiCaprio.
The film's called Wall Street.
Wall Street.
And the guy,
And he's saying greed is good and this and that and greed. Greed, what he means to say is ambition is good. Now, if you say greed is good, there's some truth in that statement. There is some truth in that statement, because if everyone became complacent, that wouldn't be good. But I would put to you that, look, and maybe just to answer the question, the difference, the main Islamic difference between greed and ambition relates to rights. So if I want to be as ambitious as I want to, I can be as ambitious as I want to, memorize this, get this money, do that. So long as I'm not taking someone's rights in so doing, I'm not greedy. No one can accuse me of greed. And the Sheikh was telling us a beautiful athar of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, inna li nafsin tawaqa, is it? How does it go, Sheikh?
inna li nafsin tawaqa.
Yeah.
فتاقت نفسي إلى الإمارة. So he became the Emir of Medina.
So to translate that bit first.
Yeah, so I'm a person of ambition.
Yeah.
So at the beginning I wanted to become an Emir, the head of Medina. So Allah Azza wa Jal granted me that. Then taqat nafsi, then I had the ambition to become the Khalifa. And Allah Azza wa Jal granted me. So nowadays I have the ambition to enter paradise, Al-Jannah. And I hope by Allah Azza wa Jal that I will enter it.
You mentioned that to me before, Sheikh, and it just stayed in my mind for a long time, because it shows that I think a lot of us don't have this. It really is problematic when a man doesn't have any level of ambition, whether this, or a woman, Don't forget, the Quran says, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ, that in this, i.e. Jannah and so on, let those who compete. How can you have a competitive nature if you're not ambitious? So ambition is a good thing, so long as you don't, sorry to say, harm anybody else. You don't take the rights of somebody else in the Islamic sense. In the Islamic sense, you can do what you want, go as full force as you can, so long as you don't do anything haram, muharram, and or take the rights of somebody else. You're not greedy if you do. If you avoid those two conditions, you're not greedy. But since we've warmed up with that question now, on our hands is another question, which is, what is the difference between complacency and contentment? Because al-rida or qana'a, or what is referred to usually as satisfaction or contentment, and complacency, there's a very, like if you go to the Venn diagram, there's a large area, surface area of continuity or contiguity there. What's the difference? What's the difference between being content with something and being complacent?
So,
being ungrateful. In your complacency, you're being ungrateful.
But does it necessarily entail that? Think about it, right? You can be very grateful, all right? But complacent, remember, going back to the definition of what complacency is. Complacency is the idea that you don't necessarily think harm is going to come your way from this activity.
Isn't that naivety, kind of?
It is kind of naivety, yeah. So it entails a kind of naivety.
another way to think about it is from a practical perspective. Think of a debate. You have a debate with somebody. Contentment would be, okay, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to put my trust in Allah. Complacency is, you haven't read their book, you haven't really researched it, you haven't really thought about counterpoints. Oh, he's the dumb person anyway. Do you see? So basically what you do is you don't let the natural anxiety build in, because anxiety is what drives you to do action. That's what, dopamine is. People think dopamine is about pleasure. Dopamine is about motivation.
Yeah.
So when you don't have that anxiety, you don't have that dopamine drive, you don't really research their books. And we've seen this in debates. You can see even when the opponent or the Muslim, you can see who's prepared, who's not prepared, who's actually was anxious before the debate. Anxious doesn't mean fear. It means you understand there's consequences for the community.
Absolutely.
You understand?
Yeah.
Like
And that's
Fury and Ngannou.
yeah.
Yeah, because Fury had went into that fight completely unmotivated and completely complacent, and he was humiliated.
Absolutely right. And I like the fight examples, and I think they're right, because these are the closest things we have in our society, modern age society, which are closest to this. John Jones, he said himself, every time he has a fight, he feels that anxiety. And he says, he has a speech online where you can find something. He says, whenever I feel that anxiety, I try and channel it. It's a good thing. If you feel zero anxiety, then you become complacent. And everyone knows that. It's the same thing with an examination. If you don't feel any level of anxiety before a student examination in school or university or something like that, that's a dangerous position to be in. And so the difference between contentment and, contentment and complacency is naivety, is delusion. Because you're deluded at your abilities. It can be a positive delusion. You're conceited. You have a misunderstanding of the severity of the task at hand. And the opposite of complacency is panic. These two things are the opposites. Now, it's very interesting, and the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is because throughout the seerah, what we've done is we've looked at how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has dealt with all of these emotions and states of being. We have discussed love, we have discussed grief, we have discussed contentment, we have discussed gratitude, we have discussed fear at length, now we're discussing complacency, and we have discussed panic. And in each one of those states and emotions, we have shown what the pinnacle of ta'amul, behavioral management of those states are with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, to the point where it's actually an argument for the veracity of Islam in and of itself. That when you have a man ﷺ, who is a novice in terms of on paper experience, on paper going into the battlefield, and you only have one or two battles, but then you're the one people are hiding behind you. You're the one calling people back, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you're the one trying to calm people down from overexcitement. We spoke about that. We spoke about excitement, in fact, the psychology of excitement in Ahzab. And now we have here complacency. He knows it's the emotional intelligence, so-called, even though the concept is something people attack. Nowadays, even Jordan Peterson said there's no such thing as emotional intelligence. I'm not saying it's some IQ test that you're going to take, like a Mensa IQ test, necessarily. But what I'm saying is, the idea of understanding mental states is certainly something which is applicable to the human experience. Whether or not you want to take Daniel Goleman's framework or not, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has shown the perfect way of dealing with each of those states. And the Quran is explaining why is it that these companions failed in the first instance, because obviously Hunayn wasn't a failure, it was a success. It was a resounding success, as we'll come to see. But in the beginning, it was initial defeat. They were getting overwhelmed by the opponent. And it was because they didn't respect the opponent. They were still on a dopamine high from the Fath Makkah and the numbers and the fusion of responsibility and all this kind of things. So it shows you that really what we want is homeostasis. We don't want to be too excited. We don't want to be too panicked. We want to try and create a balance and equilibrium at all times. Whether we're doing it in our day-to-day life, whether we're doing it in our public life, whether we're doing it in our private life, whether we're doing it in our marital life. Wherever, no, honestly, you want to create balances everywhere.
This reminds me of an athlete, I've forgotten who it was, who basically won a fight, and somebody asked him, what are you going to do to celebrate? He said, I'm going back and training in the morning like I do every single day I train. I forgot who it was. I don't know if anyone remembers. But yeah, it was just like he wouldn't let that become an event. It was just like another fight, another training session.
Wow, this was interesting. I hope you learned as much as I did. If yes, please like and subscribe, and I see you tomorrow inshallah.